All right, welcome to Two Sons Podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. My guy Luke is joining me. We are going to be breaking down episode 4 and episode 5 of Alien Earth. We missed last week. Unfortunately, Luke had some scheduling conflicts in the first half of the week, and then I had some scheduling conflicts in the last half of the week, and it just ended up getting away from us. But kind of worked out nicely because
It did.
episode 5 was a flashback episode that tells us everything that happens on the ship. So today we're going to be breaking
Yes.
down everything from episode 4 and episode 5. First of all, dude, how are you, man? We haven't talked in about a week. You doing good?
I know. We've just been busy. We've been ships passing in the night, right? No, Elena was on a girls' trip and I was on dad duty for the last few days.
Just
And at the end of
dadding
that, you
hard.
just you just feel it, like I kept it together until like last night and I finally lost it. I was like yelling at everybody. Chaos, absolute chaos, but still a ton of fun. But it's been good. I'm stoked to talk about these two episodes. It was like the perfect week for us to miss because essentially there was two plots happening, right? But how have you been? What have you been up to?
Doing good. Yeah, we similarly we were we were kind of taking things slow, getting the house set up. We had all this furniture to assemble. And then we had guests come. We had a surprise visit from my wife's brother that was kind of on short notice. And then my family, my parents came in right after that. So, like, we went from not ever having a guest up here to having 6 consecutive nights of guests. And so it was like we were just like racing to get everything ready. And then we've been hosting. I even like took a break from work. I had been like a solid week and a half ahead on work, and now
Yeah,
I'm like back to being a little
back
bit
in
up
it.
against it. So it's like it's been a little bit stressful, but then at the same time, like, dude, we've been alone up here, so it's been really nice to have some guests. And as you now know, we're expecting everybody to come visit us in late January for a ski trip
Mhm.
this year, which will be fun. It'll be the first ski trip that we're doing at one of our houses instead of at an Airbnb,
I
which will be
know it's
fun.
crazy, man. And I got
Yeah.
I got two extra tickets too, or ski passes. So you and I will be shredding down the mountain together at some point
There'll
too,
be an
maybe in
extra shred
February.
sesh mixed
Dude,
in
it's
there
gonna
somewhere.
be
Yeah.
we better get 50 runs in per day. I don't want to walk
Hell yeah,
after
dude.
each day.
All right, so let's actually start with the flashback, just because that's a little bit more recent, and then we'll get into what happens in episode 4. But we had been given a very brief look at what happened on the ship. To make a long story short, we had known that there was a one guy on board that was behaving strangely. It's the bald dude who works on the bridge, but like
Tang,
everything
Mr.
else was
Tang,
pretty chill. Yeah, Chang, and then everything else is pretty
Tang.
chill. And then after that, we just fast forwarded to Morrow running into the mother room and sealing the door with a blowtorch while the xenomorph kills the previous captain, and then he disappears into, I don't know, some sort of like safety shelter slash escape pod. Like, I don't really know what. Carly and I had a little debate last night. We weren't sure, like, are we to interpret that as like an escape pod that also landed on Earth and then Morrow came back, or do you think that's like just a safety pod that's in the
I think it
ship?
was a safety pod. I think it
Okay.
was like a final resort pod, safety pod, because he if you remember, he was a part of the crash because he ended up handcuffing those two soldiers to that pipe, and that's where we met the ticks the first
Oh yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. The first time we meet the
So
ticks.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was his fault. So yeah, I think he was just in like a little safety chamber, and then it kind of makes sense because during that initial meeting of the xenomorph and kind of Morrow, and then it hit that little safety pod thing. I was wondering, I was like, why was the xenomorph just so okay with leaving him? Well, it's because the xenomorph was attacked by that eye that apparently hates its guts. That eye hates everything other than itself. It didn't like the ticks. It doesn't like the xenomorph. It doesn't like humans. Like, I really want to know more about this eye.
Yeah, I
So
literally said
sick.
the same thing to Carly yesterday. I was like, the eye is becoming like all of a sudden a very interesting character.
Right.
It's like some weird kind of sentient character because it even extends into because so basically this whole episode tells everything that happens between those two scenes. The scene where everyone's just kind of talking and they're yelling at that one dude for being creepy and like pretty much everything's chill until all the shit's hitting the fan and the xenomorphs attacking and they're crashing into Earth, and we find out everything that happens in between. And one of the many things that happens in that span is we get some character development of the aliens, specifically
Yes.
the blood-sucking tick things and the eyeball. And so the eyeball, let's start there. What I thought was interesting there is like you're making a good point in the sense that it clearly was hating everything. But there was that weird thing where it kind of tried to warn that one
Right.
scientist about the ticks. Like he was
Hmm.
like banging on the glass, like, yo, he's
Right.
gonna get you.
I know.
And then she just is like, all right, that's enough out of you. And she goes to like put him away. So like I'm gonna bring a old Luke Huffaker trope back from the podcast, which is the eye gonna be good? Like, is that what we're gonna find out? Is the eye gonna be good?
Dude, the eye is quickly turning into one of my favorite characters, and I'm shocked that we can even call it a character at this point because it is, like you said, it's clearly intelligent. You know, it was trying so hard to let that one doctor know that the slugs were escaping. And then it straight up attacked the xenomorph. It used the head engineer, who, by the way, that head engineer is probably the only intelligent person on that entire ship. I will
Oh
say the
yeah.
guy that ends up getting possessed by the eye. And it's funny because the eye straight up just attacked the xenomorph, like using that guy's body. And at first I was like, dang, that's pretty bold of the eye. And then I kind of realized, I was like, no, it's not. Like the eye is fine. Unless the eye gets stabbed directly, then the eye is totally cool. Like it's got this amazing ability just to kind of take over like whatever is around it. But
Yeah,
that's
because
pretty
the
cool. Like
xenomorph messes that dude up, but the eye just gets out.
the eye just gets out and then presumably takes over the cat next. After I finished my notes for last episode, one of my questions for you as a prediction type question, which I think fans like, is who does the eye take over first? And head engineer was not high on my list, like because the eye took over the head engineer first as like the first human like possession type thing. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm curious about is we literally saw the eye murder the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
We did not see him murder the cat, but we can presume he did.
Right.
And we did not see him murder the old man, but we can presume he did.
Yeah, that
Right.
engineer guy,
And
the
that's the thing
or the
that's tricky
mechanic.
is like so like would it be a situation where someone's already dead and he comes in and animates the corpse, or would it be a situation where he ends up killing somebody? I think, of all of the different things that could happen to our boy Cavalier, I think
Mm-hmm.
the eye beating him would be the best because one of the things
Ooh.
that's interesting there is Boy Cavalier has this like very brash and arrogant personality surrounding his intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of briefly in episode 4 has like a staring contest with the eye. And
Yes.
it kind of is dripping with that arrogance, like you're my pet kind of thing. And so I think by far the most fun outcome would be the eye getting Boy Cavalier and animating his
Yes.
corpse as
That's
basically
awesome.
like you met your match, I'm more intelligent than you kind of thing.
Especially if everything somehow stayed a little incognito and the eye worked through Boy Cavalier and all of a sudden was just like running the world and no one knew. They're just like, oh man, Boy Cavalier has like shitty eye all of a sudden. He needs to get that figured out, you know. But I think that would be so funny. Now, I don't think it's going to go that far, you know. I think maybe at most that would happen for like a few minutes before someone realized like, hey, something's not right. Like I don't think that would just extend
Well,
into
and
a
they can't
season 2 of
talk.
Alien Earth.
That's the other
Yeah,
thing. Because if you
but
remember
it
when the
was,
old guy was possessed, he was kind of making screeching noises like,
oh yeah, Boy Cavalier's really changed lately. He's screeching in the night, never sleeps. His like he's like decaying. No, you're right. Yeah, the screeching thing was wild. Yeah, the eye is just it's like I don't want to get too focused on the eye, but the eye like brought the xenomorph back. You know, the screeching is what brought the xenomorph back into the mix.
yeah, he like
So
warned
this,
him to enter the room, but
uh
then that
huh,
was actually funny how Morrow like was like, screw this, I'm gonna let him get you first. So he like stunned the guy with the eye, then ran past him
right.
so that he had to fight the xenomorph. And then dude, he just went after him, jumped on his back and started chewing
I
on him. That
know.
was
And then he's trying
crazy.
to bite him. I was like, good luck biting the xenomorph, you know, with all the acid. Now, the other thing too that was interesting that I wanted to confirm with you is presumably so obviously there was two face hugger situations, right? And then they put the first one into the cryogenic chamber, which was like the dumbest thing I feel like you could ever do as an astronaut in that situation. Like literally the stupidest thing you could have done. Like, and that's why I'm calling everybody stupid is because like for them to let that happen was so clearly a bad idea.
Well, and wasn't the
I mean,
old didn't the old man jump in and go like just fire them both out the
yeah,
airlock? Didn't he say
yes, he
that?
did. And
Yeah.
that's why yeah, like that's why the mechanic is like the only smart one out of the bunch. Now,
Yeah.
Morrow is intelligent, I think, but obviously
He
made some
wanted the
bad
xenomorph
judgment
to
calls.
survive though. So
You're right.
his
Actually,
yeah, so
you're
his
right. So
angle
I'm
is
saying,
different.
yeah, the mechanic and Morrow are the only smart ones. But and then the other guy did get sent out of the airlock
Yes.
before okay, the xenomorph could
Because that was the
hatch.
first
Yeah.
thing I
Okay.
thought when I saw that is I was like, okay, there's two possessed. Maybe there was a
Mhm.
second xenomorph on the ship when it crashed, and that one's loose in the city somewhere. But
I
then when they
see.
fired him out the airlock, I was like, okay. But one of the things that's interesting, if you've seen the original Aliens, those old movies, like in the first Alien movie, they actually do shoot the alien out the airlock at one point, and he
Oh,
stays attached to the ship. So like they can survive in the cold vacuum of space. So first I was like, what's actually going to happen is that parasite's going to finish eating that corpse, and then it's going to fire out the chest burster into space, and that thing's just going to be swimming around in
I
the
know.
cold.
And it's going to take like a year and a half, but it's still going to get to Earth somehow.
Yeah, he's going to somehow get there. Well, in theory, uh, I guess like if you, depending on how fast he got shot out of the ship, he'd still be traveling with the same inertial
Oh,
characteristics as the ship. So maybe it just hits
true.
Earth as a meteor.
And roughly like the same trajectory. So it could like shoot some goo out of the side to like aim itself towards Earth.
What was the thing you were going to confirm though? Is it just whether or not there was two of them?
Yeah, whether or not there's two of them, and just to confirm that the other one did get jettisoned out of the
Yes,
ship. I
because it
just thought that,
hadn't bursted out of the chest yet.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wonder why. Like from like a writing standpoint, like let's say you're in the hot seat as a writer. Like, what would make you write that scene where like two people get the face hugger and then one of them just gets jettisoned like out into space? Like, I wonder what the tool was there. I wonder what the plot was there,
I
or if it was
think
just
if
something that would happen.
if I had to guess, I think it was just about kind of demonstrating how the lack of understanding of the parasite, because like
Yeah.
essentially the reason why they jettison the one and not the other is that one doctor tries to cut the tail off of the face hugger and it dumps a bunch of acid on the dude's neck and kills him. So he's dead. So then
Oh,
essentially they're like, okay, well, he's dead. We'll fire him out the airlock. They're actually convinced they're going to save the other guy's life, which
it's
is
crazy.
certainly not going to happen, but that's what they think is going to happen.
Dude, and would you, as a rational person, Jay, would you stand even near that person that has the face hugger on them?
Oh, God,
Like,
no.
oh, this person just got like pretty much eaten by this alien. Let's just stand on him or around him and then let's just like see what happens, you know? And let's put him in this like little glass pod and see if anything bad comes out of this. Like literally like the biggest what are we doing was happening as I was drinking or not as I was watching the show drinking my coffee.
Yeah, I was thinking about this with Morrow because Morrow in episode 4 tries to convince Slightly, the guy who he kind of stuck that communication ship on. He basically tries to convince him, like, hey, I don't need you to steal an egg. All I need you to do is bring an organic creature close to, like a person, next to the egg, let him get hit by the face hugger, then take him out of the building, and we're good. So, like, Morrow is very invested in specifically just getting a xenomorph back.
Right.
And so that's where it's like I even thought Morrow was clearly aware of what the situation was with the xenomorph while
Mm-hmm.
those face huggers were on those dudes on that ship. He just didn't care if they got out, which I thought was
No.
fascinating. And I
Right.
mean, and that really is the other big there's other smaller plot points like the secondary captain who comes into command, she's clearly having an affair or having a relationship with one of the scientists, which Morrow seemed a little offended by. I thought was
Mm.
interesting. Like you could tell Morrow definitely had like a little bit of a thing for her too. But
Mm.
that was like a little bit of a small plot point. We talked about the eyeball. I would do want to talk about the space, the ticks in a minute, but the second real major plot point is you find out very quickly that there's a very intentional effort to get these specimens by both Boy Cavalier
Right.
and Wayland Yutani, because Wayland Yutani, through the artificial intelligence mother or whatever, is demanding that they save the specimens at all costs. And there's really cool scene where the secondary commander who took command sits at the chair and she's sitting there and she's like asking the ship what to do next, and the ship is like top priority is save the cargo. And then she goes like, well, what about if there's an increase in risk to the crew? And then it's like please acknowledge that the cargo is top priority. And then it's like,
Yeah.
please acknowledge. And then it's like, please acknowledge. And then it's like, please acknowledge or the security officer will take control. And then she has no choice but to acknowledge, which I thought was really interesting because it's like a clear indicator that that's the number one priority. But then the flip side of that is we have the sabotage of the ship. And to make a
Mhm.
long story short, it's just this guy sabotaged a panel that started a fire that forced organic beings to run in on the eggs, who ended up getting hit by the face huggers. And then he sabotages their fuel and their navigational systems. He basically just forces the ship to crash land with all the specimens on a trajectory for Boy Cavalier's city. Which, then when Morrow's pulling in the security files, he finds a video of a conversation where Boy Cavalier is talking to this other crew member who's been sneaking around the ship and basically working out some private deal to get the specimen. So now we know that like both Wayland Yutani and Boy Cavalier, regardless of human casualties, are like desperate to get these things to Earth, which is like crazy when you think about it. And isn't there a scene? Yeah, there's a scene where like even smart people can be stupid. One of the dudes talks about how even
Right.
smart people can be stupid, and he talks about how like yeah, like we're smart enough to be able to go get these things, but we're so dumb that we're gonna bring them back to Earth. And it really is like kind of like the moral conundrum of the situation that's so funny.
Dude, that's literally it. Yeah, so the new character that we met was the saboteur is Petrovich, I think is
Petrovich,
his name.
yes.
And a little side jaunt, I think it's really cool that all their cryo chambers had their name written
Uh,
on them, and it was like Petrovich, and his was empty, and that was kind of dope. But yeah, he must be kind of a mastermind himself because he was wildly successful with what he was trying to do.
oh yeah, staying off
Um,
camera.
yeah, everything off camera, and then doing it when he was supposed to be in his cryostasis or whatever it's called. Um, the other thing that I thought was kind of cool from an action standpoint is somehow they still figured out how to get like a gun battle in,
Yeah,
and that was via like Petrovich and then Morrow and that one kid.
the
Um,
Petrovich murked that one kid though. Holy cow.
I know, and the first thing that I thought when that one kid got shot was how lucky for him that he got shot
Yeah,
and didn't
at
have to
least it
deal.
was that.
At least he didn't get a slug. Well, he ended up getting a slug in his brain, but that was after he
After
died,
the
so it was
fact, yeah.
fine. It was no big deal. But yeah, so the boy Cavalier and somehow infiltrating the ship and talking with Petrovich was really interesting, and it kind of really broke down that like all the characters very quickly throughout their time in space kind of realized that like no matter what the amount of share that they got for the company, like just probably wasn't worth it, at some point. Like the head mechanic guy was talking about how like when he gets home his wife is going to be like in her 60s and he left her, when they were 30, and how like big of a bummer that would be. The big question there too is like why didn't they just put the wife in a cryo chamber while he
To
was gone?
wait,
Like
yeah.
that would have been a really easy around like a really easy way to get around that.
Workaround, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, so that was an interesting aspect as
Yeah, he
well.
straight up
Yep.
says they're paying you for your life. They're paying you
Yeah,
for the time of your like to take away the time of your life. And yeah, like presumably there's this massive payday, but like you come home and now all of a sudden the entire world has passed you by as a
exactly.
result of that
Exactly.
situation. It's super
You
interesting.
I'm very happy that we got Morrow's story because at the end of the last episode, not the one that we just watched, but the previous one, I really had decided that I didn't think that they were going to give us Morrow's story for some reason. I thought that that would be too messy and too complicated. I thought they were just going to have his character just be kind of like a crazy person that just wanted to complete his task, but you understand his why. Like presumably it was just him and his daughter. It seemed like maybe he wasn't married at the point where he had left. And then we get the message, or he reads the message about how his daughter had been killed.
Dude, can you imagine finding out in a memo like that? Holy
Dude, I
cow, man.
I cannot envision what that would be like. It would be awful, awful, awful. And
It was just
so
like house fire, no explanation, no. It was just like she died in a house fire. She was 19.
right.
Like
Yeah, it's just awful.
all
And
of her
and
personal
then
effects will be waiting for you when you get home. Like,
yeah. And then all of a sudden things were just different for him
yeah.
because that actor has done such a good job of like being kind of evil but not. And it's been so hard to pinpoint him as a character, and it's really fun now as a viewer to understand his why a little bit more and to see why he's just so invested in this company. Like apparently he was kind of like a street rat, and then was had like a kind of a bad arm is what it sounds like, and then
Yeah, he
he
had
got
some
a
sort
new
of
arm.
arm issue that they then replaced with the cyborg material. Yeah.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden he's just like devoted to this company. So it's cool to see his why all of a sudden. That was really neat.
Yeah, and he specifically said at the final scene of the episode when he's like, I, thank you so much for taking me in and giving me this opportunity. What I thought was fascinating in that final scene was he like straight up, she was like, I'm gonna try to solve this with lawyers. And then he was like, "No, we're gonna do this my way."
Yeah,
And then she looks at the presumably her second in command and goes like, "Give him whatever he wants." So like, it didn't take much for him to basically sway the leader of Wayland to let him do that. Or maybe she's planning on pursuing both avenues at the same time. But I
probably.
agree, he's become a super complicated character. There's like a human inhumanity to him where like
Right.
you can tell he's like a little emotionally dead. He's a little like ruthless and machine like in his like thought processes, but then there's these little bits of humanity that come through, like that little bit of jealousy he felt when he found out that that girl was sleeping with that other dude, or like even like him trying to save that kid who was wounded. Like
Right.
you'd think the
Exactly.
cyborg would be like, he's not going to help me at all. He's just like this useless kid and he's been shot twice. Like I'm running away from this crazy alien infested dude or this betrayer. So like why don't I just leave? No, he's like dragging him around corners and trying to
I was
save his life.
shocked.
There's just like this, but that's really where all TV shows and movies can enter into like another layer of interesting is the gray
Hmm.
area. The gray area is always more interesting to us because it's more relatable. There's no like there's fun in like the old fashioned good versus evil, like you're watching Lord of the Rings and like the good looks good and acts good and everything's
Hmm.
perfect and the evil looks evil and acts evil and everything's awful. There's value in that type of story, but there's just another level of interest in the gray area and there's just gray area characters literally all over this show. And I thought that this episode did a good job of building that specific idea out. Looking at the other episode, episode 4, there's really three main plot points. The first, Morrow, sticking with Morrow, he tries to convince Slightly to steal an infective xenomorph and
Hmm.
threatens his mom in the process, which was crazy. But then
Yeah, there's
essentially,
that.
when
Like I forgot about that too. That's pretty rough. Yeah.
yeah, and then when Slightly goes to kind of like walk down by where the eggs are, he finds out pretty quick it's going to be like nearly impossible for him to get in. And we find out that our Kirsh, our synthetic guy who's the number 2 at Prodigy, he is listening in on the conversations between
Hmm.
Morrow and Slightly. So what that tells us is that Morrow's going to have a kind of a counterpart with Prodigy, that being Kirsch, who's clearly aware of what Morrow is trying to do and kind of on top of it. And so that'll present a foil for Morrow, which will be kind of an interesting idea.
Hmm.
But yeah, like Slightly basically says he can't get in there just because it's just too difficult, which is when the additional layer of threat comes. The next piece, and this was really bizarre because we talked about how Nibs, the redhead, how she kind of was acting weird ever since her brush in with the eyeball. Well, she basically experiences a mental breakdown and has like a fanatical like pregnancy issue that she's feeling and is acting super unstable and kind of violent. And I think that kind of ties into the main, because the two doctors, they're having that conversation out in the woods to try to avoid being
Right.
listened to.
And all
And
of a
they're
sudden they're a
basically,
couple, they're married. Like
yeah, which
that
was
was a
news
shocker
to
too.
us.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the big reveal there is like, not only are they married, but they're talking about how like this basic idea, which is these are children. Maybe they can't handle this. So like my question for you is like, do you think this issue with Nibs is like more PTSD that a child is really struggling to handle, or do you think the alien's having some sort of bigger impact on her mentally?
I feel like there's I don't know, because it's hard not to take that like I'm pregnant literally. Because like yes, it could just be a big mental breakdown, but this is alien Earth. Like, and they love to have people
Infested people.
infected with stuff. You know, so like part of me is just like, okay, is this somewhat of like a premonition where she knows she's gonna get infested with something, and then that's why she feels that? Or is this a situation which, yeah, she's having just a straight up mental breakdown? Or is it another situation where somehow the eye was able to contact her in some way and affect her? You know, you really, it's like you really don't know. Like it's hard because she's now synthetic, and the eye would presumably need something organic in order to affect. Like that's just how these aliens work. But maybe the eye was able to, I don't know, like do some telekinesis or something. Like literally, who knows? I'm so on the fence with what's going on with Nibs. I really don't know.
Well, there's like a connection too, because we've seen, one of the other major episode incidences in that episode 4 is that Wendy is able to essentially hear
Mm-hmm.
the hive mind for the xenomorphs, and she was actually able to project that sound for Kirsch and for Boy Cavalier. And there was, I can't remember the exact context, but I vaguely remember in that episode 5, even on the ship, there was a little bit of like kind of like a background communication taking place with the eyeball. And
Mm,
so part of me wonders if Wendy can hear these things, theoretically Nibs could be hearing some of them too through the eye
yeah.
and just experiencing some sort of craziness there. But there's definitely going to be some sort of crazy like outcome with these hybrids. One of the things that I think is on the table too that they're trying to set the table for is just simple violence. Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're experiencing this kind of like near brush with physical violence with Nibs over this simple disagreement surrounding her perceived pregnancy, I think you're going to see something bigger potentially where some of these hybrids go off the rails and start just
Most
basically
definitely.
yeah, because as you've known with the toddler, like kids have a little bit of a predisposition to like hitting and violence and
I've been
like
hit so many times in the last 4 months of my life. I can't even comprehend it. Like I get hit all the time,
just wait
over
till
the
Marlo
the
starts hitting
smallest
you.
things. You know, it's just crazy. No, but yeah, I thought it was another just good piece of writing. I thought was after Nibs had her little freak out with the scientist. I forget her name. Dame Sylvia.
Yes.
She Dame is very shooken up because she knows how close maybe to getting hurt she truly was. And then the cool writing part wasn't, oh, you know, Dame says she got upset and we need to lock her down. She categorized the event as like a level 3 event or something like that.
Yeah, like
And
they're prepared for it.
exactly, and they've talked about it. And again, it's I feel like when you're making a show like this, it would be really easy to miss an opportunity like that. But I thought it was just so cool that they've taken the time in order to like fully develop this to where they have their own lingo even, and they were able to call it like a level 3 event, and how everyone in the facility would know what that meant. So I, again, just like kudos to the writing in the show. It's been way, this has been so much more than just like a horror film, right? Or like a jump
Yeah,
scare.
there's
Like
depth to it.
it's there's so much depth, and they're flexing that every single episode. It's so sick.
Dude, how sick was the music at the end of episode 5?
Every single dude, it's so fun, isn't it? Like, and it's so diverse. The diversity in this show in regards to the music is so incredible. They kind of went full like Fallout, where they had some like old timey music at one point when Morrow was looking back at his photographs of his daughter. And then they always have like some level of rock that's being, you know, played at the
Mixed
very
in.
end.
Yeah.
And then of course like they have like the very like symphonic music where they have like trumpets and like woodwinds and tympanic drums. Like they've done such a good job with the music, I thought.
It's part of like it's like eerie mixed with this like kind of cool retro vibe, which kind of fits in with the tech too. Because I mean, you see that it's the classic Star Wars concept where
Yeah.
they've been making these movies for 50 years, so like technology's come a long way, but you're kind of trapped within the confines of the tech that you displayed in the 70s, and you see
Mm-hmm.
that in the ship. But they just kind of it's a part of the overall just kind of retro vibe of the show. I'm really enjoying the cinematography as well.
I did
I
like a
have two.
little. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have two more. What were you going to say? Because I was just going to go a different direction.
Regarding the tech. They nailed it. And obviously that's what they had back then. I think when did the first Alien come out? Was it like
78, I think, or 77, something
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
so the tech was so spot on and so cool looking back then. Like things are kind of boxy and more established. Now we go for like lightweight, and TVs are this thick and they're just on your wall, which is fine. I'm not complaining about that. But just like the tech had a vibe back then. It just had like a substance to it, and that's remained even with like the keyboards that they use, like very old school. Super cool, super
Yeah, the
cool. But
keyboards are
anyways,
funny too because like she's having the conversation with mother, and like you look down at the keyboard and there's like all these symbols on it, none of which are letters, but she just kind of goes like, and then like a sentence appears, and you're like,
so the other thing that was kind of
plot device.
funny
We're just
is
supposed to
when
accept it.
I know. The other thing that was kind of a little bit of a hole is when Murrow's reading. There's a point in which like you can see the text being projected across his face. I think it was Morrow, and it should have been mirrored and backwards, but the text wasn't. It was just like perfectly like legible, or yeah, you could
Plot
just read it
devices, dude.
perfectly. I know. Well, and one of our questions that we got was like, what was our take on why the knife that Wendy used to kill the xenomorph, like why it didn't melt in the acid. And it's like, yeah, you could get really in depth with that and maybe give her like this crazy knife or sword that's acid resistant, or you could just have a plot hole and the knife doesn't get affected when it stabs an alien, and I think
Yeah,
that's probably what it
it's
was.
like when you're watching an action movie and all the shit's hitting the fan, and then they kind of like pause for a conversation, and it
Right.
lasts like a solid like 23 seconds, and you're sitting there like, there's no way you stop for a 23-second
No.
conversation, but like they've got to advance the plot. My answer to the sword incident though was like my first impression. I need to go back and watch it because I've only seen it once, but my
Mm.
first impression was that the sword was half as long after cutting off
Oh,
the
interesting.
xenomorph's
That
head.
would be really cool if
So
that
I'm
was the
not sure if
case.
I needed. And by the way, in the comments, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that's what I saw. All
That would be cool.
right, two more quick ones that we need to hit before we get out of here. Wendy, her communication with the xenomorph culminates with the lung. Our guy Hermit Joe,
Hmm.
his lung shoots out a little xenomorph, and the xenomorph is tamed by Wendy in
Yes.
some fashion. What
Very
direction is
tame.
that going? What do you think? Do
So
you have any theories? I'm lost, man.
so one of the biggest themes in this show is weaponizing aliens. And I think presumably one of the only aliens that would be able to be weaponized, from these distant planets, these distant worlds, is the xenomorph. Because though it's very hard to contain, I feel like that is the only alien in which you actually could contain. I mean, we saw the absolute shit show that happened with the slugs and how quickly those propagated. Like all of a sudden, there's 1,000 slugs that they're worried about, and they're all in the woodworks, right? They're all like in computers now, and in bodies, and in water sources. Like
Yep.
that could literally infest a planet very, very quickly, and all of a sudden we'd be in trouble, right? So the xenomorph, though, is a lot more clear cut in regards to how they grow and how they rejuvenate themselves. And I think one of the biggest themes is these companies want to be able to weaponize things, and they want these brand new weapons that are new on the market, and all these aliens are as a product. I think Wendy is the link that they need in order to truly weaponize the xenomorph.
To have
So
some
I think
control over
that's
it. Yeah.
exactly. I think she's the only way that they could truly control these things. And I think there's going to be a little bit of a standoff between Wendy and Boy Cavalier, where he wants her to do things, and then her brother Joe is somewhere in the mix where she's almost probably forced to do things in order to save Joe and also to comply with Boy Cavalier's wishes. So I think that's what we're going to see with that.
Yeah, that was my first impression as well. Like, there's this clear leverage game that's being played with Joe because Joe, at one point, basically is like, "What you're doing to my sister is, inappropriate." And then they're like, "Okay, cool, we'll send you away. You'll never see her again because she's our
Right.
property."
And you
And
owe us a
like,
lung.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you host a lot, and the debt that you're going to be in, and all this stuff. So like, they leverage Joe into basically staying, and Joe is going to be their leverage over Wendy, but Wendy is going to be their leverage over the xenomorph, and it's basically
Right.
just turning into this big leverage game, which is going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. The last thing I was going to talk about was literally the little space slugs, the little ticks, because we forgot to mention that earlier. That was so not what I was expecting when that little guy got out. When he got out, I'm
No,
like, oh, he's gonna suck all the blood out of the scientist. And it's like,
right.
no, he just gets up into her water and just shoots a bunch of tadpoles into the little water thing. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that was super creepy. Like that was like those creatures were already super creepy, and then that just added a whole other layer to it. And you're right, like I never even thought about it this way. Like talk about like a planet clearing weapon. Just a bunch of like basically imagine if mosquito bites killed you.
Hmm.
Like obviously they can't fly, but mosquitoes they produce so rapidly and
Yeah,
they feed on your blood. Like it's just you can imagine a universe where essentially if a mosquito bite killed you, like mosquitoes would clear the planet of life within a matter of weeks. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah, like the biggest issue is they have zero predators that are trying to kill them. So it's all gas, no brakes with those slugs. And actually, issues like this have happened, and they've happened a lot. For example, in Illinois, there's a river, and there is this like flying carp that someone released into the river, and now they cannot rid this fish from this river. And yeah, sure, you have a fish that's probably eating things that normally wouldn't, and all of a sudden it's competing for resources. But the one of the biggest issues is the reason why they call it a flying carp is because as you drive boats by them, they get spooked and they fly out of the water, and
Oh,
they
okay.
like jump out of the water. And these fish weigh multiple pounds, so you've got to like be careful as you're driving on this river now, because people literally have gotten knocked out by these fish hitting them in the head. And I just think of the exact same thing with these slugs and how awful that would be, just because like nothing is stopping them from getting them out and about. And all they need apparently is just something that's like slightly moist in order to propagate, like a little bit of water or a body with some blood in it. And then all of a sudden they can replicate by the hundreds. And it's just, I feel like that's probably the end of us right there. Is like when I saw that scene, first of all, I was drinking something and immediately put it down. And then secondly, I was thinking like everyone is going to die because of these stupid slugs.
Yeah, they're like the sneaky big villain in this show, even beyond the xenomorphs. I've been seeing a bunch of videos on Instagram of like lionfish as another kind of example of that what do you call it, invasive species, where
Yeah,
there's like a dude who's got his little spear fishing gun in their hand spear, and he's just like going around these coral reefs, just like spearing lionfish like crazy. Because like again, these ecosystems are extremely fragile, and they're
mm-hmm.
based on a certain amount of vulnerability species to species, and you throw a different wrench in there and it could literally throw the whole thing off because like this
Literally,
guy eats too many of these, which all of a sudden removes a food source for this guy, which then and it just kind of trickles down and causes all these problems. And we
for
kind of
sure.
talked about that in the first episode that we did, but like that's one of the most interesting things about this whole series is just the whole like they're taking basically all of these crazy animals from this other ecosystem that is clearly way more chaotic and violent than what we have on Earth. And now you're mixing those two things, and it's going to
Right.
be super interesting. Do you have any other major takeaways from these two episodes?
No, man, we hit it. I really wanted to talk about Wendy and how I think she's the biggest link to the weaponization of the xenomorph. Um, Dude, it's so crazy because the the xenomorph obviously is the star of the show, right?
Yeah.
And they've done such a good job with that. But everything else is so scary that like I find myself like after the show's over thinking about like everything other than the xenomorph.
I know.
The last little bit too is like talking about movie making and filmmaking from the 80s and how vibey it was. And now we're here. And like a lot of shows nowadays just are so lackluster. And this show is not that. Like there's so many fun little tidbits that they're constantly just putting in. There's such a cool combination of CGI and practical effects. Like I love that the xenomorph looks like a dude in a suit.
Yeah,
Like
it looks like a dude wearing a suit, like and kind of like a
love it.
skinny dude wearing a suit.
I know, skinny little legs. I know, and I love that. Like it kind of looks like they had the guy like running, and then they just like sped it up a little bit. And they're like, that's how
Yeah,
we make the
yeah.
xenomorph fast. And like that's what they did. Like there's car chases back in the day where you can tell that they were driving probably 40 miles an hour, and then they just went double speed, and all of a sudden they're going 60 miles an hour. But the car's like bouncing like it never would, unless it was sped up. And like there's the same vibe with the xenomorph, even to the point where like as it's running through the halls, you could tell that it was harnessed, right? Like you could see like harness points in which like there's like an axis that you knew existed where like there's like shifting of weight, and then how it would like climb up the wall, and you could just envision like harnesses being on either side. And I just enjoyed it so much. It's such a cool way to make films. Like you and I have always been for the practical effects. We always talk about that. That's one of the reasons why we love Star Wars, because of all the droids and all the practical effects. And I hope they keep with that. I think it's a great way to do film.
Yeah, it just I've seen a lot of examples of that recently with Instagram has just been showing me ideas like that with like the way Interstellar was filmed or with the way like even just like really cool camera shots like as a as you transition from like inside a building to outside of a
Mm-hmm.
building and they can kind of do it all in one shot. There's an art to filmmaking that is more technical, and I actually
Mm-hmm.
find that to be super fascinating. And again, like CGI is kind of flatlined a little bit. It's kind of like plateaued and it's kind of stuck in this like little bit of a cheesy zone where it's just still a little bit hard to where if that xenomorph was just running around all CGI, it just wouldn't hit the same as
Just
the
wouldn't hit.
practical effects. And like again, you just lean into the plot device. Another example, the plot device is when the xenomorph runs up on that secondary captain and like gets right in her face and then she runs away and then he chases her and it's like you're like you had her, dude. You were right there. Like what are you doing?
She is so fast apparently, because
Yeah.
the entire time she was a solid 15, 20 feet ahead of the xenomorph, and he just never caught up with her.
Yeah,
you know
reminiscent of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series when Leia's running
oh
away
my
from the
gosh, dude.
from the
For the mercenaries,
from the
where she's
mercenaries.
like sliding under logs, and then they like hit the log, and they're like, oh, she got away. It was the exact same vibe, and I'm all for it. Filmmaking I think should be fun, and not that I've ever made one, but you can tell when like filmmakers have leaned into it. And I can almost guarantee that this episode was just wildly fun for them to shoot.
Oh
Like I'm
yeah.
sure in a lot of ways it kind of felt like the crown jewel for a lot of the people that were on set, just because there was so much hype surrounding it. Like to get the backstory regarding this episode was so exciting, and I think it would just an absolute blast to be on set for that.
Yep, I'm excited. We're going to continue to hopefully, if everything goes smoothly, we'll be back here next week to record our reaction to episode 6. As always, we appreciate you guys for rocking with us and rocking with the show, and we will see you next week.
Thanks a lot.